today, we're diving into, well, it's a pretty dark subject, really. The world of serial killers.
Right.
Specifically, Sean Patrick Goble.
Oh, okay.
You know, they called him the Interstate Killer.
Hmm. I've heard that name.
We're using mainly his Wikipedia page,
Okay.
kind of tracing his life, how he went from, seemingly normal childhood
Right.
to, well,
Yeah, the horrific crimes. It's always so fascinating,
It is. What takes someone there?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What pushes them down that dark path.
That's what we're looking at today, trying to unpack it all. So Goble, born in '66, pretty average childhood seems like at first,
Uh-huh.
but then there's this awful detail: his father convicted of raping a 10-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And get this, young Sean was in the car.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine? I mean, the impact of that.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, witnessing something like that at such a young age, it's got to leave a mark.
Right, and it gets worse.
Oh.
After his father's released,
Oh,
convicted again,
Yeah.
another young girl.
God.
It's like this awful echo.
It's like a cycle almost. This normalization of violence.
Yeah, and I get it. Correlation isn't causation, but
But you have to wonder.
you do. Did this pattern, this family history, did it plant a seed for the darkness to come?
It's certainly a factor. It's hard to say definitively, but think about it. A child seeing that kind of brutality, their sense of safety just shattered.
Gone.
Yeah. And that can lead to anger, resentment, a need for control.
Yeah.
And those feelings, they can fester if they're not addressed.
Right.
It can manifest in really destructive ways later in life.
It's terrifying, the ripple effect, how trauma just spreads.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand these underlying factors, not just for serial killers, but for all forms of violence, criminal behavior. It's about getting to the root of the problem.
Addressing the cause, not just the symptom.
It's exactly
So, okay. Goble, as an adult, joins the army, gets married, has a son, seems normal enough.
right on the surface.
Right? But then, marriage falls apart, moves to North Carolina, 91. That's when things start.
That's interesting. Life transitions, periods of instability, those can be real triggers.
Like a crack, you know?
Yeah, exactly. A crack in the foundation.
Right.
And that's where the darkness can seep in.
Right. The stress, the upheaval creates a vulnerability.
Exactly. Imagine someone already struggling with trauma, anger, a distorted sense of self.
Right.
A major life change, divorce, job loss. It can push them over the edge.
Makes them more susceptible to those darker impulses.
Precisely.
So the victims, Lisa, Susan O'Rourke, 29, from Missouri.
Okay.
Goble picks her up in 94.
Right.
Initially, they thought hypothermia.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That shows how difficult it can be, these investigations.
It does. So easy to miss something.
Especially when a body's exposed to the elements.
Right.
It makes it so much harder to determine the cause of death.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. You have to be so meticulous. Look at everything, the environment, the body, all the evidence.
And not jump to conclusions.
Right. Keep an open mind. Consider all possibilities.
Brenda K. Heggie, 45, from Indiana.
Okay.
History of troubles. Frequented truck stops. Those places.
Yeah. They can be dangerous.
They can be hunting grounds.
Sadly.
Ah.
Yeah. Predators look for vulnerable people.
Transient populations.
Exactly. People struggling with homelessness, addiction. They're often overlooked.
Easy targets.
Yeah. It's a tragic reality.
Sherry Tumanser, 34, Maryland. History of prostitution arrests.
Right.
And this is heartbreaking. She was last seen with her 2-year-old niece.
Oh, God.
The niece was found abandoned but safe.
Thank goodness.
Can you imagine that little girl? The terror.
It's just the ripple effect. You know?
Yeah.
The trauma spreads beyond the immediate victim.
It's devastating.
It really is. Families, friends, whole communities are affected.
Alice Rebecca Haynes. Not a lot of details on her in this source. Last seen calling from a truck stop, Kansas.
Okay.
Hitchhiking to Tennessee. That's where Goble found her.
Hitchhiking. It's so risky,
That's just,
especially for women.
it is putting yourself at the mercy of a stranger.
And unfortunately, there are people out there who take advantage of that.
Prey on the vulnerable.
Exactly. People who are desperate. It's a terrible thing.
It's awful, these stories. It makes you think about, how much more awareness we need.
We do. And more support for vulnerable people.
Absolutely. Goble clearly had a type. Women he saw as easy targets.
That's common with serial killers.
Yep.
The victims are rarely random.
Right.
Usually reflect something deeper, fantasies, desires, psychological needs.
So, yeah, a pattern
Mm-hmm.
emerging. But before we dive into Goble's psychology,
Right.
his modus operandi, it was consistent, chillingly so.
Okay.
He'd pick up women, highways, engage in sexual acts, then strangulation, dump the bodies near interstates.
That consistency, it's a hallmark, really, of serial killers.
Is it?
Yeah. The crimes become rituals, almost. Each element, carefully orchestrated.
Like a script.
In a way, yeah. Fulfilling these deep-seated psychological needs.
The sexual aspect, it's more about power then.
Often, yeah.
Mm.
Control,
Mm-hmm.
domination. Not so much about, gratification.
It's disturbing, but it makes a kind of twisted sense.
Yeah. And often there's an escalation of the violence.
With each victim.
Mm-hmm. The need for control, it intensifies. The acts become more and more sadistic.
Pushing boundaries.
Exactly. Testing limits. Looking for a more intense reaction.
God. With Brenda K. Hagee. After he dumped her body, he ran over her legs with his truck.
Oh, God. That's postmortem mutilation.
It's horrific. What would drive someone to do that?
It's about dehumanizing the victim. Ultimate control, even after death. It's a sign of a real deep disturbance.
Erasing their humanity.
Yeah. Reducing them to an object, something to be discarded.
It's just awful. So how did it end? This reign of terror.
It's almost unbelievable. A small detail, a fingerprint on a plastic bag. Left at a crime scene.
A plastic bag?
Matched a print from a previous arrest.
Wow. The power of forensics.
It's incredible. These tiny pieces of information, they can crack a case wide open.
Amazing.
Technology has changed everything. Fingerprints, DNA. It's revolutionized investigation.
It's like having a microscopic eye, right?
Exactly. Seeing the invisible connections between suspect and crime scene.
And then he confessed.
He did, and that was key. Connecting him to several victims.
Just Sherry Two-Manser, right? The Jane Doe.
Yes. The details he gave, they were able to link him to her case, finally give her back her name.
It's a small victory, at least, in such a horrific story. But the story doesn't end there. He was investigated for other murders, too, wasn't he?
That's right. Lots of them, actually, across the country.
His pattern, right? Targeting women along highways and being a truck driver.
Exactly. He was a suspect in a lot of unsolved cases. Investigators use different techniques. Geographic profiling, behavioral analysis.
To connect the dots.
Yeah. Try to link suspects to unsolved crimes.
So did they find any other connections?
He was cleared in some. Timelines didn't match. Conflicting evidence. These tools are helpful, but they're not perfect.
Right.
You have to follow the evidence, not jump to conclusions based on patterns or assumptions.
And there's this strange detail. He was investigated in connection with Dr. No.
Is that right? Another unidentified serial killer.
Yeah.
Wow. That just shows how complex these investigations can be. It's not always, one killer, one case.
Right. Multiple predators. Same area. Similar MO.
It makes it so much harder to track them down.
Yeah.
Like untangling a really complicated web.
So where's Goble now?
Through multiple life sentences. Tennessee.
He recanted his confessions, right?
He did. But the evidence was overwhelming. He's still incarcerated.
Good. So Goble's off the streets. But his Wikipedia page, it mentions Main Street Mysteries. The TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Got me thinking. About the media. And these cases...
That's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it does. Raises some ethical questions.
Yeah.
How we, consume true crime. But I think these stories, even the darkest ones...
They can teach us something.
They can. Valuable lessons.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
By looking into these minds, the people who do these horrific things, we can learn about the factors that contribute to violence.
And then maybe prevent it in the future.
Exactly. Develop better strategies for prevention.
Yeah. It's about looking beyond the headlines, the sensationalism.
It is. Trying to understand the complexity,
Yeah.
the psychology, the social factors, the environment.
It's a web, all interconnected, leading someone down this destructive path.
And it's not just about the perpetrators either.
No.
It's about the victims
Of course.
and the systems, the things that create vulnerability, make certain people more susceptible to being victims.
Recognizing the humanity in everyone involved, as hard as that can be.
It's essential, even with the perpetrators, as difficult as that is.
The ripple effect of trauma. creating a more compassionate society, just equitable.
It all ties together.
We all have a role to play.
We do. Preventing violence, making a safer world.
So our deep dive into Sean Patrick Goble, it's really just a starting point.
It is. It opens up so many questions.
It does. Childhood trauma, the psychology of violence, forensics, the media's influence.
How we perceive crime. It shapes our understanding.
There's always more to learn, more layers to uncover. It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. The pursuit of understanding never really ends.
Well, for everyone listening, I hope this has given you some insights into this dark world, serial killers, and maybe it'll get you thinking about the bigger issues, the complexities of violence, how it impacts society.
Knowledge is power. The more we understand these dark corners of human behavior, the better we can prevent these tragedies.
That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.